Well, I'm joined now by Tim Gilmore. He is a local historian, author, and the creator of the blog Jack Psycho Geo. He joins us once in a while to talk about history and all interesting things around the city. Tim Gilmore, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me in.
So you call your posts in the Jack Psycho Geo blog true portraits of a
Mm,
city. And
yeah.
in that way, I think of you as kind of a portrait artist.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so how do you describe your writing style, how you tackle stories in the blog?
Each story is anchored in a particular place, you know. I'm almost to 800 stories. I've been doing this for this is my 13th year doing these stories. I think there's somewhere in between stylistically, I think there's somewhere in between journalism and prose poems, you know. But I look around and I'm constantly wondering about the historic structures I see, what's happened here, who are the strange people who have lived in this place or that place, and so I love excavating those kinds of stories.
So this story we're going to talk about now is actually located atop a very well-known
Yeah,
set of structures, the Laura Street Trio. Most of us haven't been to the roof,
right,
but
right.
one of these buildings has this bungalow that was built there.
Yeah, it does, and whether or not it has always been called a bungalow or a penthouse cottage. Yeah, it's standing on top of the Florida Life building. So the Laura Street Trio, which we hear about a lot, of course, is the Florida Life building and the Bisbee building, which are both early skyscrapers built by Henry John Clutho, and the marble bank in between them. So the Florida Life building is the one that's actually on Laura Street. Um, and I think just real quickly regarding the Florida Life building, the only way to really see how gorgeous and grand it was before it was treated horribly in the 1990s is to stand in front of the St. James building, James Weldon Johnson Park, and look straight up from the middle of the building because that ornamentation there, that's another Clutho building, is very similar to the ornamentation that used to be on top of the Florida Life building.
And the St. James building we know better as City
City
Hall.
Hall, yes.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Okay. So it used
yeah.
to be have that same detail, and that was removed.
Very similar. Yeah, it was removed by Nations Bank, which owned the building in the 1990s and literally, not metaphorically, but literally had workers up there hammering and chiseling it off as a um, aggressive form of, demolition by neglect. It's been in really rough shape for a long time. So lots of people know the Laura Street Trio, but not too many people know that there is this cottage that sits up top.
How did that come to be?
Right. So there was a guy named Charles Clark who was president of the Peninsular Casualty Company, which had its offices in the Florida Life building, who built this cottage on top. Clark had asthma, and he thought that the higher the air, the cleaner the air. So he was going to use this cottage as a way to get himself into cleaner air sometimes. That's why it was built. I actually found this fascinating cartoon in the old Florida Metropolis newspaper. It's from 1914, and this cartoon shows these little tiny houses on top of skyscrapers and telephone poles. And it says, when we get to living up in the air, and there are people who have signs that say, come on up, with they're dropping a rope ladder to the street, and there's somebody else who's offering a cup of coffee to an airplane going by. So this was considered a really unusual and radical thing, when it was built. Um, the most famous resident of this cottage, however, was somebody named Bernard Burney, who owned a place called Bernie's Restaurant, which was right around the corner. He could see it from his house on top of the skyscraper. Bernie's Restaurant was in the old Elks Club building, right underneath what's now the Carling, and Bernie was actually Russian, but he presented himself as Irish. He was known as the Man in Green. So all of the advertisements for his restaurant would say, "Come dine with the Man in Green." He really took that to as far as he could take it. He wore a green suit, a green fedora, green shoes, a green diamond pinky ring, walked with a green cane.
Wow.
Yeah,
He was
everything
really
in the
committed
restaurant
to
was
this.
green. He was so committed. He had a Boston Terrier who wore green. So,
And probably did up the St. Patrick's Day party.
absolutely, he opened the restaurant on St. Patrick's Day. As a matter of fact, that was opening day. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And so he lived up there. I mean, what happened to this place? And
Mm.
how unusual was a rooftop bungalow at that time for Jacksonville?
Yeah, pretty unusual. And he lived there throughout the 40s and the 50s, and
This was
then
like a landscaped
yeah,
rooftop house.
he had a lawn up there. He had kind of a tiled front porch with a jukebox and all kinds of stuff. He had antiques in it. So he worked every day, really long hours. But this was his view of the city. This was his view right from the heart of things.
So its status currently?
Well, it's been, like the skyscraper it's standing on, it's been empty for a really long time. I honestly don't know how, if at all, it has fit into any of the redesign plans. I can imagine it might be an afterthought, but it's kind of a legendary little place. I mean, for somebody, it would be a really cool place to live.
It does seem like forward thinking. You see
Yeah.
people who plant roofs now and
Mhm,
have green
mhm.
landscaping up there, and that's sort of this new idea. But
Yeah. Well, and new ideas are often old ideas, right? Actually, yeah, if you look back at, a lot of the buildings downtown, a lot of which are actually gone now, even back in the late 1800s, there were rooftop gardens and, places to eat that were on tops of
maybe not
roofs.
pools so much, but the
Right.
garden experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Well, it's always helpful to go down a little historic path to learn more about this city. Tim Gilmore, creator of the Jack Psycho Geo blog. Thanks so much, Tim, for being here.
Thank you so much, Anne.